Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Monte and Wolf Show. Dgon here alongside Wolf as the LCK has completed play-ins. So we're going to dive into that. It means we're saying goodbye to two more teams as well in, spoilers, the Giga Chad Bros and the Noodle Boys, Nongshim Red Force. First ever play-ins was great. I'm glad that we got it done. We finally answered the season-long question as it was been translated. Head of the dog or tail of the lion? And looks like the head and neck of the dog better than the tail of the lion, as B&K Fearex and Dplus Kia book their tickets on in. But before we dive into all the play-ins, the big question that we answered from last time, well, we got the answer from last time. When will All-Pro votes be released if they're not being released at the end of the season? Kind of had a JK surprise. Here's the All-Pro votes, and it goes mostly the way that you'd expect. Wolf Chovy gets MVP. Yeah. First team All-Pro is all Gen G. Maybe that one is the one that you wouldn't expect. Then you get a smattering of T1. BDD shows up in the mid lane as well. And then for third team All-Pro, Hanwha Life players plus Faker in the mid lane. So no nod to Zeka. Peanut does retain his spot. When you looked at All-Pro this year, Wolf, how did you vote, and what surprises jumped out at you, if any?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just to briefly address something that I've heard a lot, there was the leak, right, from MidNoFlash that the All-Pro votes were going to be at the LCK Awards, and then he subsequently leaked that they were not. And then the All-Pro votes were released during play-ins, which has never happened before. So I wasn't a part of any of these conversations as to what their plans were, but it looked like they really wanted to release them during LCK Awards, and then because there was a lot of backlash for the leak from MidNoFlash, they decided to release it as normal, or at least as close to normal as possible. And I saw a lot of people saying that it was crazy that they would do it during LCK Awards. And I think that for me, I agree, because the timing of All-Pro is most important at the end of the regular season, not like after Worlds or after play-ins even, or after playoffs, because a lot of the players that we're going to talk about are involved in those tournaments. But the LCK Awards is a really important new yearly thing that, I mean, it's not new, but it's been going on for the last few years here at the LCK, and it's been a huge way to generate sponsor revenue. So my theory is, again, I don't know, is probably they were trying to set up some really big sponsor segment and also to draw attention to the LCK Awards, because it's a really big moment at the end of the year. In Korea, at the end of the year, or towards the end of the year, it doesn't have to be like at the very, very end of the year, a lot of companies spend all of their marketing budget. So you can actually, if you have a huge show, like this is why if you look back at esports over the last like 10 years in Korea or even longer, there's tournaments like Kespa Cup at the end of the year that have huge, massive sponsors, because everyone's trying to spend their marketing budget so they can then, when Q4 is over, say like, I used all the budget, I need that same budget for next year. It was successful, blah, blah, blah. So I was thinking, like, okay, they really want to make this a big thing. I think it was absolutely not the right call, if that is in fact what they were planning. But this is just to explain to people why LCK Awards is really important, and actually why LCK is continuing to try to build LCK Awards up. And if you want to support the LCK, like, check out LCK Awards. I know LCK Awards has had some of the more controversial like winners. Like Player of the Year for LCK was Zeka when DRX won Worlds, which was, you know, why they changed the criteria for what that means and stuff like that. But I think that might clear up some of why people were wondering, like, why this was even being considered in the first place. Because obviously it seems really nonsensical to announce those votes later in the year when the regular season ended there. So should we go, Dgon, through each role as we normally do, and like each, I suppose, like each category, so including like Coach of the Year and all that stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with the top lane. I voted, and you both we both voted, obviously, for Keen. Maybe early on in the season, Zeus's laning stats were crazy. The amount of pressure he was creating was first in the league by a large margin, both in experience gained, CS lead at various points in the game, 7 minutes and 15 minutes or 14 minutes. And the amount of champions he was playing, it was great. And then it never really evolved when the meta required you to, as we use this term a lot, matador more. It was just more that Zeus would push so hard and be so mechanically gifted to kill that they would have to send extra resources to kill him sometimes, but he would still die. And it felt like Hanwha Life Esports weren't able to capitalize on the pressure that he was creating all the time. Whereas Keen and Doran, and I think Doran is the big one here that was surprising. But Keen was just a franchise player that you can have him play any style, whether it was absorb the tower pressure, need to get a lane lead, except against Zeus, and was just all around malleable. So that was kind of why I went with Keen over Zeus here.
I think that's a totally valid vote. I think like Keen for me was the pinnacle of best performing top laner in every metric, and his team he could chameleon into any type of top laner. Like if he needed to pop off and win the lane, like he could pick that. If he wanted to absorb pressure, which was much more common, and that's generally Genji's playstyle, he could do that in an incredibly large amount of ways. Even if he went like 0-3 in a game on Gwen, where he had an unfavorable matchup because they blinded the Gwen, he still did like massive damage in team fights, and so that was why it was pretty easy for me to go number one for him. My initial thought was to put Zeus second, and then I was like, no, there's no way. He's just way too inconsistent. The difference between Zeus and Doran is Doran was so consistent. Like if you remove the early rocky T1 games from LCK Cup, which by the way they could have like won the whole thing, we don't even know. Like they lost to Hanwha barely, who went on to win the whole thing. And you remove, because this isn't even part of LCK, but like if you remove that part of the year, and then you remove like some of the first few weeks of LCK where they were still figuring out their synergy, where Doran was arguably actually at that point like maybe the strongest and best performing player on T1 for a little while. Like he just he just was incredibly good for this team. He ended up looking like almost like an upgrade when we got to the better parts of it, and T1 just looked insane with him. I remember when he had his first like we had tank Jace at the beginning of the year, and he had his first like tank Jace game for T1. I don't remember who they were playing against, but he just popped off. And I think it was actually an important matchup. Might have been like Telecom War or something like that. But I was like, okay, he's here. He's playing well now. And then from then on, he just was pretty consistent, right? And Zeus had so many like failed dives on the top side, or weird flanks that went wrong, or bad team fights, and I just couldn't. Even though it seems like his highs were sometimes higher than Doran's, like his Jax performances and stuff like that, I just think Doran was the better top laner across the year. And I thought when I made this choice that I was going to be like either ridiculed for it, or people were going to be like, I can't see it. And I thought Zeus was going to be the favorite just because he's more popular, right? His highs were insane. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that in fact he got all second.
Yeah. When it came to votes for Keen, the only votes that weren't for Keen were the Genji votes. When it came to second team All-Pro for Doran, it looks like a couple of the analysts on the Korean broadcast side thought Zeus were better. It was Cloud Templar, Gogo, Pony, and Prince. And then, interestingly enough, a lot of the Zeus votes came from players. So BDD voted for Zeus, Showmaker voted for Zeus, but otherwise everyone that could, and Ruler voted for Zeus, but everyone else voted for Doran here in this slot. Coach Song, I think, going for Zeus as well. So kind of surprising how that kind of shook up. Yeah, I always find that fascinating how the players vote, how the coaches vote, how the Korean broadcast sees it, and how we see it. But pretty much similar there. And then that left Zeus there for third. There were a couple of shout outs to Perfect. but it was mostly for the teams that it's mostly for the teams that had one of the players that you couldn't vote for. So it came from T1 Hanwha and Gen G that threw in the perfect votes, which makes sense. But yeah, top lane felt pretty straightforward here, Wolf.
Yeah, top lane was pretty straightforward. Let's move into jungle, where it gets a little bit more interesting, I would say. Canyon ended up winning pretty overwhelmingly in this one as well, but not quite as overwhelmingly. Whereas on the global side, a lot of people really valued Owner over him, myself included.
Yep.
And to me, I just thought that he was the more impactful jungler across the year. And you can like do all pro by a bunch of different metrics, but for me, I usually try to make it basically a tier list in most cases of what your performance was for the year, right? And
yeah,
you could make an argument that Canyon was like, if you had the best possible team, if you're trying to build an all pro team, that like Canyon would be the best bet because he's just played with so many different players and like has with like the best and most winning laners been the most impactful jungler like across his career. And like we can't say that about Owner, but we can say that about Owner this year. And like when I think about Owner this year, I think about Jin Zhao being the most meta jungler for majority of the year, and him by far being the best Jin Zhao player that we had in the league, and saving lost games for T1, and hard carrying and snowballing games they had won, controlling Herald fights incredibly well, controlling first Grubs fights, early on in the game really well. Stuff like that, his smite control, just he had so many moments that made your jaw drop on the floor this year, and never really fell off to me. So I pushed that vote up to 1 because I just felt like his performance was better than Canyon's. Again, I'm not saying he's like way better, but just was the more powerful jungler, more impactful jungler across the year.
Yeah. You brought up a good point that we probably should have started off at the top. The voting criteria that you used for the type of vote that we're doing. So for you, it was a tier list. For me, I think it was who had all pro performances. And when I think about that for all pro, with this unique format, I have to consider. I don't consider who you were playing against. So that, and this is the most important because this is where I take the liberty of who they're playing against. That is dictated by the format, right? I think I valued in big matches, did you show up? And against your competition, were you the catalyst for success? And in this case, I think Canyon was key to the success of Gen G in a way that feels like if Chovy isn't having insane laning stats like he normally is and just blasting people with mages and then winning the game, blasting the game open like he did last year, and he's doing a little bit more of the Galio and Annie at the end of rounds 4 and 5 and playing a little bit more of the utility. If Keen, again, not a Zeus type, blasting the lane, getting huge leads, creating a ton of pressure, is a little bit more of the Matador and Feng Shuiing things. Who is making stuff happen? That has to be Canyon. It has to be Canyon, and it has been Canyon. He had a slow start to the season in round 1, I would say. LCK Cup in round 1, but we're not considering LCK Cup because it doesn't exist. So, but Owner had massive performances for T1, and as you said, while T1 were figuring it out, sometimes it was Doran. I think a lot of the time it was Owner kind of piecing the wins together, for sure. But as we moved into those tougher games, we had the quote-unquote big 3, the Legends group of champions. You have World Champion, you have MSI Champion, you have LCK Champion in T1, Gen G, and Hanwha, respectively. Owner did not stand up to Canyon consistently enough, in my opinion, compared to other matches. And I think that was telling both by the team, but also by Canyon's soft influence in how he carries those games. And I think Yeah, and that was mainly how I voted this one. It was when these two are so great, and Owner had higher highs in the season, but when it came to the clutch matchups, important matchups, Canyon won out in those, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of just, you and I both had really similar opinions, but I slightly favored Owner, you slightly favored Canyon there. So we can kind of skip over second, because we both did the opposite, and like that.
Yeah.
Like there were a few peanut votes for like Genji and T1, weirdly enough. But beyond that, it was just all Owner Canyon. Third got really interesting because there were a lot of different options here, because Peanut was, for a lot of this year, struggling. Like he was struggling at the road to MSI. He was struggling at especially like Esports World Cup, and the lows of a player whose highs are considered to be normal often are easier to spot and like more memorable, I think, for a lot of people. So a lot of people really didn't want to vote for Peanut, including me. I was like, I don't know if I could vote for Peanut for third All-Pro, just because there's too many blemishes. Like it's a little rough around the edges for this guy. Like, is he really top 3? And then I considered who I would have to vote for, and I was like, is it Cuz? And then I was like, is it Gideon or Lucid? And I was like, no. And then I thought about Cuz actually quite a bit. And I just decided, no, I don't think it's Cuz. Like, Cuz looked really good at times this year, but it was often just the BDD show. So I decided, okay, let's think about the whole year. Let's think about Peanut throughout all of the LCK year, just to be clear. Like, let's think about the whole picture. And I decided, even though I don't like what it looked like at its worst, at its average, I think Peanut was still the third best jungler, and I kind of just locked it in. And it seems like most people kind of decided that was the way as well. Like, and Peanut ended up getting a majority of the votes for third, but there were some interesting voters like Dgon himself who did something a little bit different.
Yeah, it goes back to, how do you view All-Pro? And for me, it's All-Pro performances. And when I think of Peanut's year, especially here at the end, when he had the competition he was given, I think of not being able to land a smite to save his life, like just getting stolen by Gideon, stolen by Cuz. I think getting outpaced in jungle, and was the reason why Hanwha Life were losing games. Like, he was either invisible or kind of making these uncharacteristic of Peanut's career type mistakes. That was kind of fascinating to me. So I couldn't really go for it there for Peanut. So then you move down the list. If that's the criteria I'm using, well, then it's definitely not Cuz and definitely not Gideon based off of the second half season performances. So you have to go to Rise Group teams. Although Gideon had such great highs during LCK Cup, but you really couldn't consider them based off of the second half there. The second thing then is you go to Rise Group. Lucid having some struggles as well. So that was, especially in rounds 3 and 4, kind of got it together a little bit more. But still was kind of an issue. You then, who's after that? Then after that, I was like, oh, it's Raptor. B&K Fear X is a team that's been there for a little bit. I think that's pretty. Yeah, they've hung around the mix better than everyone else in terms of Bro, DRX, DNF. So okay, let's see. Who's the reason for success on that team? It's Diablo and Kellen leading the league in solo kills for a while, but also Diablo kind of was over-diabling, overheating, and losing. They had a black hole in the mid lane named Vikla for most of the season until Vikla kind of gained form here in round 5 and into play-ins, which was good for the team. And Clear also kind of inconsistent, sometimes serviceable, sometimes getting ran over. So yeah, Raptor's been the reason. He's been the guy. He's been the catalyst for the team finding success. And in those performances, he was the one that was getting the best of Krakow in important matchups. He was the one getting the best over Lucid, other than the game where like Lucid had Xin Zhao and had his highlight performance there, I think in round 4, maybe it was round 5. But he wasn't letting the upset come from Pioshik. So I was like, oh, by process of elimination, who had solid performances throughout the second half of the season and wasn't terrible the first half of the season? It's Raptor.
So like I was the first person, maybe the only person, but I know I very vocally absolutely talked mad shit about your vote when I found out. I was like, there's no way. Like, you got to go Cuz at least, man. Come on. Like, I was like, Peanut is not a vote anyone feels good about, but it to me was the right one. But let me just say, this was before like play-ins had really kicked off when I was talking shit, and it did not age well. Raptor was probably the MVP of the play-ins. Like, he was by far the most impactful player across all play-ins teams in my mind, and really popped off. And he had so many good moments. I do agree with you throughout, especially the second half of the season. And we'll talk more about B&K in general when we're done talking about All-Pro, but he did massive work, and I respect it as an niche vote now. Like I've changed my mind on it. I think it's like it's kind of like the Pleta vote, although I feel like actually better than the Pleta vote that Dan did.
I was like, it's a little better than the Pleta vote.
It's a little better than the Pleta vote, but you know, it is what it is. Everyone can vote for whoever they want. That's why they have the right to vote, and that's how democracy works. But I think this one is definitely better than that one. There were a few voters, actually 2 voters, in fact, who went for Lucid, which I thought was, considering some of his really rough periods, which were quite long, not appropriate. Like, I like Raptor more than Lucid. I like Cuz more than Lucid for if you don't consider play-ins, because you can't, because the vote happened before play-ins. But in hindsight, like, not a bad vote. Not a bad vote. Solid move.
Yeah, I think Cuz is the Raptor vote if you're not considering if you consider the competition that they're playing, right? It's like, well, he has a harder matchup and his lanes are getting blasted. What is Cuz supposed to do? And in my opinion, I'm like, well, it's all pro performance, and Cuz when we attribute success to KT, we attribute like 80% of it to BDD. Like, that's the BDD show there, and we reflected that with our votes. So I was like, I think there were too many times where Cuz was a little too invisible, or when Perfect is just getting absolutely 3-man, 4-man dough for the 4th time. Cuz is like farming his blue buff. And I was like, oh, you didn't have the foresight to be there, hover around, call for the play. That to me kind of is why I didn't vote for Cuz, especially when he had so much impact last year on the Freaks, and we know how impactful he could be.
All right, let's move on to, weirdly, what I thought was going to be a very controversial one, but it ended up being very straightforward in the mid votes. So Chovy ended up getting unanimously the vote. And again, Zeka and BDD had 1 vote for Genji staff, like Ruler and Coach Kim. So that's unanimous. We consider that to be a unanimous vote because you're not allowed to vote for players on your own team. So everybody knew that was going to be the case. Everybody was going to vote for him for MVP. That's straightforward. The question became, who gets second All-Pro when Faker's laning stats were the worst in the league in some metrics? Like, there was that huge uproar that happened on like FM Korea when somebody did data collection and showed, like, basically everyone has these like pentagram like diagrams that show like your CS difference at X minutes, your solo kills, like all of your laning stats into, what you would see on like a JRPG stat graphic or something where it's like, what's his strength, his defense, his HP or whatever. And like notably Faker's was very small and fans were very upset, but it was just like statistically true. Outside of lane though, Faker was one of the most impactful mid laners throughout the entire year. So it was like, okay, they're winning despite his laning phases. Why? In part due to owner, as we've discussed previously, but also in part due to Faker just making incredibly intelligent plays and reads on the map, despite having a small lane deficit. And he had, his laning you could see with the eye test was not as impressive as it used to be. And like it felt like the Faker summer like kind of fall off that we've seen came early. Like it was happening very early on this year, and then he just continued to be incredibly good. So the question became like, will BDD pass him? And for me, the answer was BDD was one of the most impactful mid laners. I could not vote him over Chovy because I think that would be like, I'm obviously a known BDD fan and he's my favorite player. Like everybody who knows me knows that, but I still was like, there's no chance I vote him over Chovy. But for me, I thought I was going to be one of the only people who voted BDD over Faker when we first started talking about All-Pro. But as it got closer, when I was telling people like I'm ready to vote BDD second, people were like, oh yeah, I'm doing that too. I was like, oh really? And I just started to talk to like everybody, and everyone's like, yeah, I think it's BDD. I'm like, oh, okay. And like obviously a lot of people were like, I'm scared of what the fan reaction to this will be, but I think this is the right choice. So I was like, well, let's see what people do when it actually comes time to vote. Will they vote with their minds and their like true inner feelings about it, or will they vote Faker because it's safe and they're scared? And like most people voted BDD, surprisingly, actually. And I obviously as a BDD enjoyer, I was happy to see that. But it was like, Faker getting third, I felt like was so obvious to me as well, because he made so many big, huge plays happen throughout the year, including in their very last matchup, right? Where he had that incredible teleport read on Otacon. Like stuff like that, no other mid laner is doing. Like Chovy is not doing it, Like Faker just has so much experience. He could see so much of the game because he's watched and played the game professionally more than anyone else at this point. And so situations that have never happened before, like that Otacon teleport on his Orianna in a really scrappy team fight where he's able to realize like, okay, I think actually if I just close this gap a little bit here, I can actually turn this around and win the game. Those types of moments only he can see. And I think it would be a tragedy if like Zeka got it instead of him after Zeka's year. Because some people, I think there were some Zeka votes. I think some people looked at Faker's laning stats and they were like, nah, I don't think so. Like, I don't think it's him. But most people did put Faker third. There were a lot of other votes in there, like some people put VDD third and put Faker second, stuff like that. But I thought mid ended up being straightforward to me. I didn't think the votes would be, but again, kind of pleasantly surprised this year that people did the right thing.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know what's changed, but we all kind of saw it the same way. You've hit all the points that I mainly want to hit. Maybe, the question is, are we valuing? No, I think we got it right. We valued performance against competition and attributing amount of success to the team, to your performance. And BDD had solid performances against some of the best talent in the league and was without a lot of help. Sometimes it was Duck Dom, but then Duck Dom got like stunted when Wei went in, and Wei, kind of showed he wasn't ready, unfortunately. And so it really was just BDD waiting for opportunities to carry. I remember there was one game where like everyone was dying a ton and BDD was just holding it together. They eventually lost that game, but it was just so fun to see that like solo carry opportunity. Would he do it? Would he be able to do it? And most of the time, if they won, it was because he was able to get themselves over the line. And then Faker over Zeka, I think, is kind of a no-brainer. Let's move to the more contentious area in the bot lane, both bot and support. Not really contentious for us, I think. Definitely not at the first team All-Pro. Ruler gets all first team votes. The only ones that don't go his way are the vote that he made and the vote that Coach Kim made, which can't be for
We're different
himself.
in this case. Like Coach Kim voted for Viper and Ruler voted for Guma, so that's pretty interesting.
I think that they were colluding because
Could be.
Colluding isn't the right word. They just talked because one voted for Zeus, one voted for Doran, one voted for Peanut, one voted for Owner, one voted for Zeka, one voted for BDD, one voted for Viper, one voted for Guma, and then Delight.
No, make sure their votes weren't the same so that they didn't sway things. I get that because otherwise people could assume that like they're trying to impact the vote in a certain way.
I guess everyone else voted the same way. Like T1 voted.
Sure. Well, like if that could have been like the thing that made like the difference, like if that was the discerning vote, I could see why people would be upset with that. Also, especially in first like vote when you can't vote for your teammates, it's kind of like it feels like a throwaway vote anyways. So I don't hate it if they were like, all right, like Guma and Viper were really close, like which one do you prefer? I'll do the other one because I think it's synonymous. I don't think you should vote that way, but I don't think it affects things that much. And you're already forced to not vote for yourself. If you're Ruler and you can't vote for yourself, you're basically being asked to lie in this vote.
Yeah.
As Ruler was definitely the best AD carry. I think at the end of the season, he broke his ceiling and went even higher, and started to look even better. I think that probably influenced a lot of people towards the end, where you could have, I think, at times in the year, like during the middle of it, like been like, is Viper number one? And then like it was the interesting thing is the reasons why I voted Ruler first are very different than why I voted like Viper or Guma over each other, right? And we'll get to that in a minute, but Ruler dominated lane because he had the backup of Duro, who played insanely aggressively with him. Their synergy was top notch. And I guess like maybe we for this first All-Pro I can bundle them together because Duro set Ruler up in lane so well. Maybe when we get to sport we can talk about what Duro did outside of lane. But anyway, I voted both of them first because they were able to snowball so many games to be over and get like a massive CS lead in the lane with very little jungle attention. So many games so consistently. And the Ruler on Corki, for example, like when I think about Ruler this season, I think about Corki and I think about him no matter what his support is playing, whether it's Nico or Nautilus, like he just says the game is over in the first 8 minutes because I said it is. And it's cool that we have like Chovy and Canyon doing stuff and, Keen is absorbing pressure on the top side. He's like, I'm just playing this mini game down here where I kill the bad guys and they die. Or if they don't die, they lose all the farm and I win the game. And then I show up to team fights later and pop off. For Guma and Viper, to me, it was all about like what are they doing in team fights, like how well are they fighting, like what's the late game look like for them. For Ruler, it was just about like he ends these games early. He pops off in team fights because the game was over long before that, and in part because his success with Duro in the 2v2s.
Yeah, you hit the Viper points, and I think, as you said, goes kind of hand in hand with Duro. I did, after individually going through all of them, I was like, man, am I a cringe all one team voter? And it did cross my mind. However, this is one of the historically greatest teams of all time. One of the historically greatest single season performances of all time. So yes, I did vote for all Gen G first team. Because I didn't let the fact that I was voting all Gen G first team deter me from voting the best player in each role, which happened to be Gen G. There we go. Got there. With the same voting criteria that I've been using, it's like against your competition, did you show up in the big matches, especially in the second half of the season? And I think with Viper, that was the most interesting thing. At the beginning of the year, we were like, man, Viper is putting in not only an first team All-Pro performance, but like MVP type performances. He was such a fix for all of Hanwha Life's esports' issues that it was great to watch. It was just such a pleasure to watch. However, when we got in the Legend group, he was on the losing side of these lanes and not impactful enough the way that both Ruler and Guma was. And people can point to, Guma dying in the bush, haha, like kind of through the games against Gen G or whatever. But if you go back to the rest of the games, he was super solid. He won a couple of those. When they won, he was the reason why they won a couple of those games against Gen G, and along with Owner, and had a fantastic bounce back. That doesn't include the fact that he had the pressure of being benched earlier in the year. The team was trying to figure out how to work with Doran. I'm not even considering that. Just from the performances in the eye test there, Guma played better in big matches more often than Viper did at the end. And when your team is based around your success because other players are struggling, like Viper was earlier in the season and then stopped doing it, I think that was the negative, and that's how I split the hairs there and voted Guma over Viper. Wolf.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what you said there. I voted for Viper over Guma because my criteria is different than yours, right? And my criteria is like year long. And so there were so many games, as you guys know, because I've talked about it on the show. I've talked about it on air at LCK. I've also, anyone who's around me knows, because I'm yelling at the monitor like, Viper can't do, like, he can't do more on this team fight. Like, he's trying to clean things up. Just he fucked up everything, and he's like, God, guess I'll carry again. And like,
That's true. That's true.
And yeah, he did do so much of the cleanup work for Hanwha in their close games or in near losses. But I do agree that especially towards the very end of the year, it's not that he played badly, but he made a lot of mistakes, and he also just wasn't able to make the same consistent impact that Guma did. I think Guma was definitely the better player at the end of the year, 100%. T1 really figured Guma's rollout in this roster with Keria later on. Like they were very consistent throughout a lot of this year, and obviously because they are T1 and this roster has so much synergy together, et cetera, even when they're not playing at their most crisp, I think they can take a lot of games and Guma can have great performances. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Guma was playing badly. At the beginning of the year, there were some issues with Fearless, right? And they hadn't figured out their style yet. But that was really more of an LCK Cup thing than anything else. And then there were some, obviously, early games in LCK where there were issues. But that's fine. That's not why I didn't put Guma first. I just think Viper overall was more impactful, especially for his team, and had a bigger impact, whereas T1 is kind of... It's hard to vote for AD carry especially and quantify their impact in second or first for T1 because the team doesn't play through one particular player or one particular style game to game, especially throughout most of this year. Like right I said, they don't have a very defined style, and Guma ended up being like the Jhin guy and the utility guy this year, and that ended up working incredibly well for a ton of their Jhin bar drafts, for example. So he was really, really good at the end. T1 clearly knew how they wanted to use him. It never felt like they were stuck in drafts where, like, towards the end, where, like, Guma needed to play a pick like Zeri or Ezreal that he doesn't like to play, and they were hindered by it. And I think that's impressive. Like, T1's drafting style, knowing their clear weakness and setting Guma up for success, and him finding that success consistently was pretty insane, especially towards the end of the year. So it was very easy for me to say Guma is third. I think there were some people who were like, not sure. I'm thinking about players like Ducktom, who had an insane end of the year. Players like Diablo, obviously, who had some really high highs. And even, considering, like the, moving someone else into that spot, like aiming, was somebody actually did vote for aiming. Valdez did, I think it was. Let me see. No, it was actually Atlas who voted aiming. Aiming, I think, was the best AD carry in the Rise group, but Guma was just more consistent to me, and I'm pretty happy with these votes. Like, it took me a long time to decide between Viper and Guma because I had to reset my brain and go, no, Guma is way better now. But for me, it's like about the whole year and your consistency across the whole year, which is why I ultimately pushed Viper ahead of him. But for those who are upset to think like, I can't believe he thinks Viper is better than Guma right now. I don't actually. I think Guma is better. So I hope that helps you sleep better at night to know that like I also acknowledge that truth, but it's not my voting criteria personally.
Yeah, totally get that. I think, oh man, you bringing up the Viper highs were just, I just get excited thinking about it again, because it was so crazy to watch. However, I think when it mattered more at the end of the season, it's all good. So that's where I ended up going with my votes. Now, before we get into support voting, I probably should have done it, after we did, before we did bot lane. Gotta remind you about our friends over at Raycon. You hear us talking about a lot here on the show. That's because it is the product that I use the most every day with their everyday earbuds classics. They're packed with upgrades, which includes active noise cancellation, multi-point connectivity, so I can pair two devices at once, an ergonomic fit, bunch of different earbuds that works really well. I'm on my third pair because I lost my first two, but there's nowhere else that I'd rather go than over to Raycon. When I'm forgetful, quick charge function has me covered. 90 minutes of listening with just 10 minutes of charging. And if you full charge it up, 32 hours of battery life. Really easy to use with a couple of one-touch functions there on the side. I'm telling you, great earbuds, the Raycon's everyday earbuds. Go check them out over at buyraycon.com/M&W for 20% off site wide. That's buyraycon.com/M&W for 20% off. Thanks to our friends over at Raycon. Go level up your listening game. Buyraycon.com/M&W.
Thanks to our sponsor, as always.
Let's get into support. This one ended up being the contentious one here, Wolf. Were you a carry guy? Were you a Duro guy?
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier I was a Duro guy because of the 2v2, but Duro did a lot in team fights as well outside of lane. And I think he was, despite having a few games, like a few one-off games where his lack of experience, even though he's got a decent amount of experience now, but it showed that he was making perhaps the wrong call or a bit of a missed call. But what's so impressive to me about Duro is that he can play as if he's been playing with this roster for years. After all, like when you consider how short his timeline in the LCK is, it's kind of insane. And then he plays as if he's been playing with his team for years. He has very little experience, but is like not costing his team games. Is able to help Ruler, who's easily the best AD carry in our league right now, to great success as well. And like it's just like this guy he's kind of like cheated and skipped the steps of becoming a top tier support. Like usually you kind of gotta like fight your way through, prove yourself in some other rosters, and then you can kind of like slowly push your way up to the top, like the Delight way, right? Or Carrier, right? Who wasn't just by default instantly the best support, had to like prove himself before he ended up getting onto T1.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because Duro was the guy they got, I think, for, like, in my mind, like, they needed to save some budget somewhere with this super team, right? And then they ended up just, like, winning everything because they got this insane guy who had a ton of potential, right? We knew that on his time on Sandbox. And then he just comes in here and he's just suddenly the best support, the best, 2v2 laner with Ruler, and just consistent engages. Like, yes, there were some games where you're like, Duro, that was a little weird, especially towards the end of the year. But like, it's so easy to forget that and remember the consistency this player had all year long. And to me, it was kind of a no-brainer to vote him for first.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing was it felt like you could see him getting better. It felt like when there was a learning lesson for Duro, he'd be like, "Oh, I can't do that anymore," and then just you would rarely see that happen again. And the fearlessness to go and make the plays and not worry about looking stupid on this roster, and then it coming off, I think, was so reminiscent of like a peak carrier. Like he's doing it in front of the guy that he's said is his idol and is one of the best, if not the best support ever. And yeah, like, because when I think about it, I'm like, man, Palu also a young support. Look at him go in there, try to make the play, and Palu looks dumb. Like Duro never had, rarely had those moments, and then had moments where like I didn't see that angle, and he did because one, he has great players around him, but two, he's not limiting them; he is enabling them, and that was a great watch to see here for Duro, his growth and whatnot. In terms of with Keria, for me, they're at the end, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, Keria's Bard, the craziest in the world." It is, actually. However, he did have like, I think they pulled out the Bard in one of those games, and it didn't look great. And we were all like, "Oh, Keria's Bard isn't an insta win. Every ult isn't. Every Tempered Fate isn't perfect." And I think that was an interesting one. I think earlier on in the season, trying to figure out the synergy with Guma, especially because they were reportedly, trading scrim block times with Smash. I think it took them a little bit longer to ramp on in. Whereas, as you said, Duro skipped the steps into not only solidness but greatness, kind of like if you play Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild and you're like, I'm going straight to Hyrule Castle, I'm going straight to the boss fights, and died a couple times but not as much as you'd expect at all.
No, I mean, I thought, Keria had some incredibly high highs, but when I thought about Keria this year, I thought about Bard only, practically. And like some Nico games, some Rakan games, But I was really thinking about like, okay, what's Keria played, what he's done, and I thought, okay, he has had some incredible saves in games, some incredible Rakan games. His Bard is third most played, but his most played obviously since round 3. And I just thought, okay, Keria is insane, but Duro just a little bit like more multifaceted. And that's not like Keria's fault. I think a lot of it's the drafting. So Keria sometimes just keeps playing the same thing throughout a season because that's how T1 do. They have their identity, they have their play style, they master it, they win with it. And then sometimes they do something crazy and wonky, right? Like Keria is also famous for that. We had a few of those games for him this year, but not as many. I voted Keria over Delight because I think for Delight, he had so many games this season where I was like, he's not on the same page with his team. His team is so reliant on him, so I almost gave him a pass and gave him second, but I was like, no, Keria is just too strong right now. But Delight had like, he had to set up the engages when Zeka was not playing well and needed to also go in, and he just had to make it happen on his own so the Viper could then clean up. So I actually considered for a while, like, is Delight more important than Keria? And then I was like, no, Delight had too many bad games. And I get it because he's trying his best. Like, he's literally the Hanwha formula is Delight goes in, hopefully Zeka and Zeus get something done, and then Viper is like, okay, well, even if you didn't, I'm here and I'm going to clean it up. You guys died, but you did enough damage. I am going to win the fight now. And so Delight is kind of always the first to go and the first to die in most of those situations because of that. So I think, though, that because his judgment was often wrong there, I had to push him down to third. There was an argument to be made with some of Delight's like really weak performances that you could go like Kellen or Peter, which I think is kind of based. But I personally thought that both Kellen and Peter had such a rough start to the year that I was like, well, that's my voting criteria is for the whole year, and I can't personally do that. But if you vote towards the end, as a lot of people do, I think you could have said it's not Delight.
Yeah, a couple people went Kellen on the Korean broadcast side. I think Pony and Prince they went Kellen. So Delight dropping all the way out. Otherwise, it seems like everyone voted there for Delight in third. One person on Nongshim, Shelly voted for Kellen, and one media member. But yeah, this was a figure out your order of 1, 2, and then 3 was pretty clear Delight. But There you have it in terms of the player all-pro votes. That is the way that we went with it. Let's go to now a little bit more contentious, and I think this time I'll do it right, Wolf. We'll talk about the framework in which you vote. MVP, most valuable player. I think valuable. How do you determine value dictates how you vote here, Wolf. So why don't you go first? How did you vote for MVP?
MVP usually for me comes down to two things. Like my initial instinct, which is who is the best player in the league. That's like that's the best performing player, right? And then it's how many like palm points do you have? Like how many times does everyone else also think so? Because then clearly you have incredibly high value. And how many like really, really big impactful plays have you made throughout the season? And I think for most people back in like April, they knew it was Chovy. Like you knew in April. And then
the most people voters are the early knowers.
And then you just kind of keep going through and you keep popping ideas into your head. You're like, is it still Chovy? And you're like, of course it is. And then you look at his palm results and like player of the match does not equal MVP, obviously, but it's a really good metric for a majority of people thinking that you have made the largest impact on your team across so many important games, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a bit stacked in your favor if you don't lose ever, because Gen G only lost one time in regular season, so you're going to get more opportunities to be the player of the match in those cases. But he was just so consistent. Like, it was super obvious to me. A lot of people vote very differently for MVP, though. They're like, what's the most value for your entire team? Like, are you the most valuable player on your team? Then you could have like considered voting for Viper, or more accurately, probably BDD, who was obviously the most impactful player on his team. A lot of people vote that way. When Gen G is all getting the all pro first votes and everyone's performing well and every player is the best player in their role, you could argue like Chovy shouldn't be MVP if that's how you think of things, because he has all of the best players. So he does what he does is less impressive. Like, some people actually argue that way. That's not how I do it, but I think a lot of other people do. So, you'll see some different votes as a result of that. But to me, it was kind of just a shoo-in that Chovy would win, and he did.
Yes. For me, I looked at it in terms of, with this year's performance, who is the player that I would want to build a franchise around? So with Chovy, I went Chovy, Keen, BDD. And I think maybe you and I were the only ones that voted for players in the same team. No, it was me and Wadid. Me and Wadid were the only ones that voted for players in the same team. He voted for Duro, second team, second MVP. For me, it was, we only get to see like all these different shades of Gen G because of how malleable Chovy has been compared to what he was in his past career. Maybe MVP performance is like what I said earlier, smashing the lane, playing mages, and bending the meta to his will. That is one way to calculate it, and maybe you value running your team like that. To me, the way that I valued running my team if I was drafting would be like, wow, we can save last pick for anyone else because Chovy can blind pick anything into any matchup and play the margins to maximize the amount of CS that he ends up being in a deficit. Maybe this is a 15 to 20 CS deficit and he's down like 5, or it's a 15 to 20 deficit, but in one of those windows he made a play down on the bottom side of the map. He can play anything. He wins matchups hard. He makes losing matchups win, and then he enables the rest of his team this year, right? Is he CSing as much as he could within lane? Yes. Is he missing timers where he could be making a play to go grab chickens? I think this year, no. And that's like a pretty cool evolution that allows Canyon to function, allows Keen to function, allows Ruler and Duro to function. And I think that is what I valued the most, that level of consistency, despite what odds were given against him, and enabling others around him. And so that part also goes to Keen. I think he was so reliable, right, in terms of, and versatile on what he could do. Whereas, like, if you wanted the meta warping top laner, you would go Zeus. That's not what I value here, because you saw how the outcome worked out. Like, the team couldn't work around it. Whereas if you needed Keen to do that, he'll do that. If you need him to play a Matador, have people dive him under the tower, look like he's out of position, and then surprise, like, gets a double kill and a 3-man dive under the bot lane so that the rest of the team can function, I value that. And then third, with BDD, it was one of those get this man a team kind of votes where, like, he is the most valuable piece to KT by far compared to everyone else. And I'm excited to see, now that it seems like they've locked their roster in a little bit more with the bot lane. I don't want him to be the Teddy of the mid lane, where it's, okay, well, let's let BDD get to late game and maybe he'll make one of those game warping plays on Orianna, or get the right shove on Talia. But I think he's the one that can carry the most out of all the players if I was building a franchise this year with this performance.
I mean, there's just some crazy numbers you can always see with Chovy's lane stats. One that really stuck out to me was he was like 2.4 or something like that. Let me check again, actually. Look this up. His first blood victim percentage was incredibly low. And, like, considering he's always up in the lane, he's always pushing hard, it is crazy. 2.6% of the time he was first blood victim. So that's like 1 out of 40 games, basically. He dies first in a game. And he's always walking that tightrope. He's always pushing the envelope. And okay, that was actually from rounds 3 to 5, but he's 3.7 otherwise. Anyway, it's super low, right? He's always pushing the lane, always getting CS advantages, generating on average, like this year, by the way, 9 CS above his opponent at 15 minutes, and still not getting punished for it, not dying, right? And 1 out of 5 times, like, he was participating in First Blood as well. So he's just making such an impact in the early game for a team that snowballs so incredibly well in the early game. Guy's just good. He's just insane. It's hard to vote against him. Like, I think there's so many arguments to ridicule you if you don't vote for him, even if you say my metric is something else. Like, you know, that's part of it for me. I wouldn't ridicule anyone who didn't, but I feel like you leave yourself open to saying, like, I don't think Chovy is the most valuable player in the LCK, and it's like, you know, like, you were making that statement. I couldn't make that statement, Dgon. I think a lot of people are braver than me, but I couldn't say it.
Yeah, I couldn't either. Yeah, MVP, glad it went the way it did. Another amazing year by Chovy, making sure that we detail how it's different compared to years gone past. I think the final big one I wanted to hit here was Rookie of the Year. We only
this is the big one.
We had minimal candidates to choose from. Obviously, Duro would have been a runaway, but he's not a rookie. Guys, you should be paying attention. Our candidates were Calix, Shiwu, and Diablo. Those 3. And Wolf was, I think, one of the only people to vote Shiwu first and Diablo third. You and I both had Calix second. But I'm interested in why you went with Shiwu first, despite him having, like, some difficulties there.
So if I, like, walk it back, so you and I both have talked about Diablo a lot on this show, and you know that I have always been on a very much lower opinion of Diablo than you throughout the entirety of the year. I think obviously he's an incredibly strong player. Don't get me wrong. I think some of the wins that, you know, we saw BNK take, especially in the latter half of the season when they were, in my opinion, the best team in Rise Group. We'll get to that later. It was a lot about him, his cleanups, his aggressive plays, his risk taking that paid off. but sometimes it didn't pay off. And there were so many times this season where I thought he was relatively quiet. And so I didn't think he was a bad player by any means, but I think even in Nongshim's hardest times, Calix was showing up, and in their best times, like Calix was a huge part of their wins. He was incredibly consistent. But Shiu, to me, was the player who had across the year so many pop-off performances. Like I think everyone had really got recency bias with Shiu to put him down at the bottom very recently. I'm talking like the last 3 weeks of LCK. Everyone's like, oh yeah, no, Shiu is terrible. I don't know. It's not him. But if I had taken that same person and asked them, like in, let's say, week 6 or 7 of the LCK at the very beginning, who they'd vote for Rookie of the Year, they like literally say it's Shiu. It's already decided. It's 100%. You're fucking stupid for asking me this question. And I think a lot of people forgot that, like, that the beginning and middle of this year was all Shiu. How many amazing Ambessa plays did we see? Like his incredibly impressive engage champs that he played where he could actually have agency in team fights and stuff like the Ambessa. But even like his Rumble was pretty good earlier on in the year. And now that he's being put on tanks and not performing on them, people are like, oh, I can't believe Wolf would say Shiu was the Rookie of the Year. But I think in terms of consistency, same sort of vote metric for me this year for what I'm looking for in All-Pro, what I'm looking for in MVP, consistency, right? And I think Calix had some weird and underperforming games, especially the first half of the year, was still more consistent than Diablo. Who, of these three, like he's the picture of inconsistency, right? So that was, another reason why I put him third. But I look at Shiu and I go, okay, yes, at the end there were problems, but at your most average, you made some of the most impactful plays and saved Dplus so many times. And then there was obviously like the LCK Cup where Shiu popped off. Whether you count LCK Cup in Rookie of the Year or not is like, I personally don't think you should, but I guess for Rookie of the Year, you kind of could because of how like that, like it's a new player entering the space.
Yeah.
I don't think you should, but he was really, really good at the very beginning of the year at Kespa Cup, and then he just rode that momentum into the LCK so incredibly well. And was, in my mind, the most hyped player we had joining the league this year. Like everybody was like, this guy is it. Like this guy is what like people thought Thanatos was going to be, and obviously he's not on a team that's as successful as T1 like when Zeus joined, but the vibe was this guy is like Zeus. This guy is going to take over the top lane. For so long, people thought that, and like people were saying if he goes on a better team, like it's crazy what he's going to be capable of. And then like there were problems later, but for consistency's sake, I thought he was the best choice. And it was really hard for me because all three of these players are so different. They do very different things. They're on very different roles, right? And
yeah,
what like Calix is doing versus what Diablo is doing, like Diablo is trying to make outplays and sometimes succeeding and sometimes not. Like for my metric, I think you're always going to end up with this type of vote, right? Like where you think about consistency, it's going to be Shiu for the year, Calix, and then Diablo, because Diablo was like coin flippy for so much of this year. And so that's probably not going to be Rookie of the Year for me.
Yeah. So I think it's funny because Dplus and BNK kind of have inverse problems at that earlier part of the year, which was, man, again, there was no mid lane for BNK Fear. So there was only one way they were going to get a lead and figure it out. And it was through bot lane dominance. Like Diablo was so good. Kellen got third team All-Pro votes. Like, I think, yeah, I'm applying a lot of what you said about Shiu to Diablo. Like, in my head, Diablo is a truly viable top 3 team defeating weapon, right? He is a win condition against any of the top 3 teams. I don't know if Shiu is that, and maybe that's a product of the role, but I don't think he is that. I think with Shiu, and it goes back to, do you consider LCK Cup or not? A lot of his highs were LCK Cup in that first round, and then it started to I think the vibe of Dplus started to get shaky until they won those games to make it into the play-ins, make it into the tiebreakers, and then ultimately lost to drop down to the Rise group. And then the beginning of the Rise group was just miserable, right? If we were talking about Showmaker and Beryl being invisible, now Shiwu's acting like a rookie, which is understandable, especially given how the team's playing. And then Lucid started playing bad as well. Like, that happened, and that wasn't LCK Cup. So I like kind of value that. Whereas B and K, you're right, it was coin flippy, but the highs were crazy high, and the lows were like, it felt so throwaway games to me. I don't know why. I'm trying to remember why, but it just felt like, man, they put the eggs in the Diablo basket and it didn't work. But that's the only basket that they can put it into, because Vikla is relearning League of Legends. Man, I'm doing a lot of
the drafts were often trash as well for BNK. Like, Diablo wasn't set up for success in a lot I
earlier in the season, like
a lot of the drafts were just literally unplayable Misfortune draft or unplayable Xayah draft, or like some weird Lucian game. Like, they put him on Lucian so many times where we're like, I don't think this works, and it didn't.
Yeah.
But you put him on some of his best picks, like the Kai'Sa, the Zeri, even the Kalista, which was niche. He also played 2 games of Yunara, won both of them this year. Like, he is good at those types of champs, but like, they kept drafting him other stuff that not only was he less good at, but that there just wasn't a comp for. Like, I think BNK had some horrible drafting this year. It got better at the end, and it's still continuing to be better right now. We'll see what that looks like for them later on, but he was not set up for success, and succeeded a lot of the time despite it. So that's it's a point in his corner. I think if you get upset about Rookie of the Year votes, though, especially when it's this close of a race and it's this tight, and like literally, like, every person you'll ask will give a different answer. And it's not even just like who's first, but like the difference between their opinion on who's second and who's third is so variant. This is one of the most varied Rookie of the Year votes we had, where it's not just Vickley getting Rookie of the Year by default like we've had in the past. Which people who were there remember that kind of did just happen. He just kind of got it by default because we're like, well, I guess he's the only one, and so he wins. This is actually a more interesting vote. People gave their opinions. A lot of people defended their opinions. Some people didn't because they don't have to, but we're doing it here right now. And this is the one I've heard the most outrage about, although I haven't really seen it. I've just heard from people that people are very upset about the rookie votes. Like, just move on. Like, it's okay. Like, all 3 of these players are, like, Nongshim struggle city right now, knocked out of play-ins. Okay. B&K, they were able to make it through, right? But they had to fight through play-ins, and like Dplus, barely made it through play-ins as well, with some performances from Shiu that weren't great. Like, I don't think anyone should be like, I knew my guy was the one. It's so obvious. Like, I can't believe they were wrong and they voted. It's not that type of like scenario for Rookie of the Year. It really isn't. Yeah. So like, definitely. I don't know. I feel like people need to chill the fuck out about this one. It's pretty subjective this time around, in my opinion.
Let's dive into Calix, because I think that was a fascinating one. You and I both had him there second, and he unseated Fisher as the starter. He gets thrown into a lot of great learning lessons by laning against Chovy, Faker, BDD, and Zeka, and had moments where he was the win condition. Had moments where in our like minutes of the match or moments of the match, whatever it was before we go into a game, it was, here's Calix, here's Faker. Like, I was like, oh shit, this is a win condition. This is a way that they could play and have played. And his Azir was something that was a threat to teams where it started getting banned and picked away from him. So I think that just he performed okay in a high value role in the toughest competition of that role, and was was serviceable. And I think that's, to me, when I think about consistency, that was why he was brought in over Fisher. Fisher had some high highs on the Tristana and some like big whoopsies. And Calix had a much higher floor, and we're not sure what that ceiling was. And that is why I had him second.
Yeah, I mean, like Calix was very consistent also in a ton of Nongshim's losses. You like look at his KDA, you look at his performances, you look at his damage numbers, and you're like, it wasn't his fault they lost this one. Like that was kind of how I felt, especially the second half of the year. We're like, oh, another loss for Nongshim, but it wasn't because of Calix. It certainly wasn't his issue. Whereas often you could point fingers anywhere else. At the very end, you could not point fingers at King either. But yeah, that was
at the very end. It was pretty clear where you point the finger. Yeah.
So I think any vote, any of those three in any order, actually you could justify. And so if you're just a fan of one player and you're like, it's my player because I like them more, then keep sending angry messages, I guess.
Yeah.
So unfortunate your player didn't win it, but I think anyone could have won this one. And that's why it's exciting. That's why it's cool.
Yeah.
We're lucky for that.
Yep. Well, all right, boom. There you have it. We knocked him out. The All-Pro votes. We're not even going to do Coach Kim. Congrats.
Nah.
Like that's
GG.
Like maybe you could have done like, all right, look at these coaching changes. Odin got some wins for DNF. Duke got some fun playable drafts for Bro after the change. I think it's a lot easier to tell, is this new coach better than the old coach based on the drafts? But other than that, like, I don't know. Like, it's always difficult to do coaching staff of the year. Always difficult. Life is busy, but you got to make sure you fuel yourself right. And it can be tough to do that when you're already busy, but that is where Factor has you covered. With over 65 different weekly meals to choose from directly to your door, it is the option to go for. Now, they have different types of options to choose from, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. And if you got some wellness goals, they have you covered with friendly meals like Mediterranean diets packed with proteins and good for you fats. Now, also, if you want to try different flavors, they got you there for the first time ever. Try Asian inspired meals with bold flavors influenced by China, Thailand, and more. And from choices to better nutrition, that's why the people have said 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. Feel the difference no matter what your routine is. So head on over to factormeals.com and use the code MonteWolf50 off. That's use code MonteWolf50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code MonteWolf50 off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Get fast, delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. So make sure to take care of all that. One more time, that is factormeals.com and use the code MonteWolf50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Thanks to our friends over at Factor. All right. That was All-Pro voting. We still have the matches to go through here for play-ins, which weren't they weren't the craziest thing that we had seen, but still, we'll go through.
Play-ins were a mess. Play-ins were a mess, Dgon. There was not a lot of gameplay that was inspiring, except Raptor, it was pretty inspiring, but otherwise. Let me just put it this way, and I'll spoil it for what's happening on Wednesday. I predicted 3-0s.
Did you really?
Yeah.
All right.
So like let's break down some of the concepts, because what I really took away from, especially because it's our first real BO5s for a long time. And for some of these teams, like basically first ever, and for some of them last ever, for this year, the more important thing than which S tier champs you got in game one because both teams, it seemed, in these best of fives would be like, all right, I'm getting all the OPs in game one.
Yeah.
And whoever had the better comp, which was usually the blue side team because they got to pick first, would win the game. And then the red side team, who picked a lot of champs that are really good for them and then they lost, wouldn't have those for the rest of the series. And then what happened was whoever could build a real team comp in the rest of the series would win the games that they had the real team comp in. And a lot of the time, teams just picked some stuff that was okay in lane, into the like counter pick for lane, or that their players were comfortable with that didn't work together at all, like even a little bit. And they would just unceremoniously, even with like sometimes like a 2,000, 3,000 gold lead because of their lane matchup counter picks that they had, lose the game because their comp can't team fight, or they couldn't lock down the enemy's area because they didn't have engage because it's fearless and you lost all your engage, and then you didn't ban Zeri, and then the other team was like, wait a minute, it's a free win. And so draft mattered a lot. Draft was really important. And that was a takeaway for me that kind of makes me wonder how playoffs are going to go for teams, for example, that we've said we're a little bit potentially worried for draft, like T1. Draft was so important in these games, and I know because we did Fearless before. We did it in LCK Cup and in First Stand, that even our best teams sometimes end up with comps that aren't a comp. Like they're just 5 champions. And that was a long time ago, right? And a lot of experimentation has been done since then. A lot of things have been learned since then, for our top teams. I think for our smaller in the standings teams, maybe we're still learning.
Yeah.
But the team that impressed me most in draft was BNK, easily. And then the performance of Raptor, which got them over the line in so many of those games in the early game. I mean, he took over the game, got his bottom lane ahead, was going for like Nefiri level 3 ganks and getting Diablo and Kella massive leads. That was the game plan. That was like, they knew their identity. They drafted to it. They played to it. They made team comps so they could play that way. And they just ran circles around everyone else. I said before we went into play-ins that B&K was the best Rise group team. I said that to everyone. I predicted against Dplus twice in a row, even though I was wrong the last time in regular season. I told everyone this team is better than Dplus as a 5-man unit. Dplus won that last series because Lucia had the pop-off Xinjiao game, and then Showmaker had that pop-off Aura game. I know I've been saying this for a really long time, but to me it was not a shock that B&K beat them and went through. Like, that was the expected result to me, because B&K just are a better team. Dplus have serious issues in their team fighting and shot calling. How many games did I watch Dplus in play-ins have like an 8,000 gold lead, but if you covered that part of the screen and covered the items, I wouldn't know it based on how they were moving around the map, how they were team fighting, how they were not pushing lanes and starting to threaten inhibitors. They played so nervous. And this team, I think, does not have a chance against any top team in playoffs if they continue to play like that. And I don't think you can solve these issues over the course of an esports weekend.
Well, that's we had Showmaker on the space afterwards, and that's kind of what I thought too, Wolf. Like, to go from squeaking by the bros, right, and doing exactly what you said, which was that, like, have like a 8,000 gold lead, can't quite finish in game number 1, and kind of same thing here against Nongshim in game 2, in game 1. Sorry, it felt like they did change fundamentally playing afraid. Like, that's what it felt like. After they got through game 1, game 2 and 3 looked like, wow, this Dplus team is back. Also, partially Nongshim being a beaten down team with all the losses that they've taken from the Legend group. Like I said before, when we were at work yesterday, I think the team that loses first is going to lose because both these teams don't know how to take a punch, right? They don't know how to handle that kind of failure with the level of pressure in their face. I think Showmaker can, and like he shared the insight with like, hey, we asked, hey, were you weren't nervous the day before? You said whoever's going to lose today will die. Were you nervous today? And he goes, no, because if we lose, we're out and that's it. And that to me is kind of chaotic and fun. And I kept telling the guys that's fun. And that kind of shows how psychopathic he is in terms of like, wow, this could be a lot of pressure. Scary? No, this is a lot of pressure and my like career's on the line. I had so much dopamine. That was the word he used, so much dopamine. And I think maybe since the players are now at that final moment and now at like, oh, wow, this is all it. They're finally listening to Showmaker and playing loose. Like Lucid was just loose. And this is what you're saying. Like, I don't think they can fix that. I think facing their mortality of 2025 has changed them from being away from a talented team to a vibes team. And Showmaker's vibe is chaotic. Showmaker's vibe is crazy. And Lucid is kind of taking that. I don't think aiming will ever be that. And then Barrel has bought in as well, because I don't know why, but Barrel was the one that changed the most for me, Wolf.
I just think that my problems with Dplus didn't go away throughout the course of play-ins, which is objective setup and team fighting is all over the place. It is just like if it's a even slightly close game state, Dplus will I'm not gonna say they'll likely mess it up, but like they often mess it up. And that's just too much volatility against teams like T1 that they have to face in the first round of playoffs, or potentially KT they have to face if somehow BNK upset. If otherwise you just play BNK in the lower bracket and lose again. You know, like the problem isn't solved in that I'm watching Shiu flank on Sion and Orange still. You know, I'm watching Lucid go in when he sees the angle when his teammates aren't there to follow up. I'm seeing a big commitment to first target, see target, go for target when that target is not a good one. It's a tank or a target that has an escape. We're still seeing aiming, even though he was the best AD carry in Rise Group in my mind, get caught in really pivotal moments when he's fully online and scaled up and has gotten a lot of resources, trying to carry, trying to make an impact, and failing. And I think that's like the story of Dplus to me is, oh my god, we had this game in the bag, we're losing it, I've got to do something. And in each one of these 5 players will be like, it's me, I have to save it, I've got to do something. And it's like, she was like, I'll flank on Sion, and then I'll get seismic shoved and die. And it's like, Lucid's like, I've got to do something. Our team might lose this. It's got to be me. I'll save it. And then he goes in a little bit too early and dies. And like, or Showmaker is like just trying to side lane vigorously, like trying to save it, trying to get some goal. I'll carry later. Gets picked off. And then like for aiming, it's very obvious. He's like, I have to do the damage. I'm gonna see if I can get some damage layered in here just real quick before it gets focused down and die. And Barrel, I don't know. Barrel he's always trying to do something, and we don't really understand it, and it costs them a lot. But it just is this feeling of, if you look at some of the timid games from Dplus, you can tell like the games are 8,000 gold ahead, but they don't start Baron, and they don't actually look for a 4-1 push to try to open up inhibitors. You can tell they're like, oh, we made too many decisive calls in this game state, and then messed up the team fight and lost the game. So instead, we'll just kind of wait and see if they make the first move. And since we're 8,000 gold ahead, we just counter engage and kill them with our wallets. Like, and that worked, but it's not going to work against a top team. Like against a top team, you're going to be at a even or deficit game state a lot of the time. And you're not just going to be able to say, well, we'll let them make the first move. They'll make the first move and take the Baron away and win the game. You know, you have to actually be decisive. You have to make those calls, and everyone has to agree with the call, and everyone has to be on the same page, and you have to make them quickly. And right now, BNK is doing that better than Dplus. And it at times, like I would even argue, like Nongshim did that better than Dplus. And so, like, and Nongshim has also got a similar problem to Dplus, and as you know, they also struggle to make those calls, but I think if Dplus are going to make a run through playoffs, just like keep playing Ari, I guess, you know, like keep playing champs, like keep playing LeBlanc and see if Showmaker can just 1v9, you know, put him on a Kali even. I hate a Kali right now, but like maybe that's a champion where Showmaker can 1v9, like play that way because if you think you're gonna play the same League of Legends that the rest of the league is playing and beat T1 or Genji or Hanwha, I just don't think you will. Like, you never will. So maybe you have to just lean into the Showmaker dopamine.
Yeah,
maybe that's the play.
A stressful play, but maybe that is the play there. For B and K, the Raptor 13 ball vote aged well. That whole week of me doing that aged well. But more importantly, it's got to be the rise of Vikla, man. Like, holy cow! And it's not even that he's doing like all pro vote worthy. It's just, oh man, you could be a top 6 mid laner. Like, that's all they needed. That's all they needed. And now it feels like the team can function again.
Yeah. And like, Vikla looking good, Raptor making the early game plays, setting up Diablo. It all just makes sense, right? Like, Vikla not being a liability is good enough, actually, as it turns out. Like, that's good enough to actually push you into a better situation. I still have questions about the top lane for B&K. I still have questions about what team fighting and macro looks like when they're not ahead. Like, I don't know if they'll be able to stack up against the playoffs teams, but they are by far the most interesting team that came out of play-ins. They're the most interesting storyline now in playoffs, and I think they're the team that we're all going to be watching very closely.
Yeah. I'm excited to see them against a non self-imploding Nongshim to be able to keep moving on.
So Nongshim, to me, like, there's this argument. I want to talk about Nongshim for a second because Nongshim was the team that was like you mentioned the lion. It was the dog's head versus the lion's tail. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
When you were talking about, I've heard. Okay, I haven't heard that one. I've heard the head of the snake versus the tail of the dragon, which is same thing basically, right? And so, like, that's been the big concept is, like, did Nongshim lose their confidence? Did they lose their ability to play the game? Did they, all this stuff that's like been discussed for ages that we discussed at the beginning of the year? Like, would you rather be 5th or would you rather be 6th? Like, I generally think that Nongshim had a lot of these issues even at the beginning of like before round 3, like at the beginning of the year. And when they got into the legend group, they just weren't able to fix them. And they got more exposed for for the weak points and their inability to read team fights and stuff like that.
Yep.
And some people wanted to say that Dplus was better than them because they ended up being more successful in the Rise group. They looked like the better team, and then ultimately they won in the play-ins match to secure their spot. So at the end of the day, like, they were better on that best of 5 on that day. They made it to playoffs. They might make it to Worlds. But I do think that it's what can be true is that Nongshim were a legend group team, but also never improved and never were able to remain like a top 5 team because the rest of the teams in the league grew, including B&K, right? B&K grew, yep. Dplus grew and evolved in a different way, although it's it's hard to quantify like how good it is, but it's good enough to get here, right? To ultimately top 6 and make it into playoffs. Nongshim were a team that like at the beginning of the year, they did so much right. Like, they were great at the double grubs meta. We joked about Gideon grubs and all that stuff. Like, they were fantastic at that. They knew how to snowball early leads. Jiu was not he was not playing badly. He was not the best AD carry in the league early on in the year, but he didn't lose his confidence and make huge mistakes and trying to like flank on AD carry. His positioning is like atrocious. Like, that wasn't happening. And then Kingen could get it done with Gideon's power. Both Calix and Kingen, empowered by Gideon, Nongshim were great. Like, they were a legend team. They earned their right to be a legend team. They were top 4, actually. they were better than KT. They were way better than KT, actually. And they just didn't grow. They didn't, like, the legend group opportunity that we talk about, where it's like, oh, you're constantly playing against the best teams. How will that shape you? How will that mold you? How will that make you better? They just didn't improve. And to me, I think there is some psychological impact of losing only in that group, getting depressed about it, and not feeling great about it, and then playing worse as a result. But I think it was less about that and less about the fact that their coaching staff wasn't able to change how the team was playing and the style they were playing and the drafts they were playing to mold into their own identity. And they just kept trying to play around like Lehen's shenanigans, basically, and ultimately, like, that failed. Because Lehen's, I think, was the guy who was like, okay, I know how I want to play these games, and it felt like no one else was like, are we sure we should be doing that? Elise pick right there? Like, are we sure we should be doing this? How about we play some global comps like we were doing before when that was working in round 2? They're like, nah, we'll put Gio on a late game carry, it'll be fine. No, don't do that. Don't put him on that. Like, that's not going to work. That used to work. It's not working anymore. I was very disappointed with Nongshim.
Yeah, and I kind of think, oh man, I'm just going in on players today. I think that's a limitation of Lehen's. Like, I think Lehen's knows how to win with great players. I don't think he was able to relearn how to win with lesser parts. And I don't think it's a stretch to say, like, this Nongshim team is not as talented as the Genji team that he was on before.
100%. Yeah.
Whether that was Jiwoo, whether that was Trigger, whether that was Fisher or Calix, and Calix ended up being okay. It's just disappointing in a disappointing way, and I think it's going to affect some people's careers here because of the way that it happened and the story of this team, which was, if there was one way to describe early Nongshim, do you remember what it would be, Wolf? How did they win? What did they have to do?
I mean, for me, it was the pylon composition where they just all played together with a global and got on top of somebody with some weird Lehen's pick like the Shen or the Elise Snowball, and that was like when Nongshim was at their best. I mean, that's what I have in my mind.
Yeah, the phrase was "listen to your young," right?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, that yes, there was that.
I mean, what you described is them doing that.
Yeah.
It was listen to your young, and I think it kind of showed the limitation of what the young could do when the competition was harder, when then, there was no longer a surprise on how they could get a win. They had to actually game plan for it and punch a hole through it. Maybe it should have been a lot more through top lane and through Kingen, and that's why he was leaving Jiwoo alone like so consistently. But I think that it was not a good year for Lehen's, and that's going to be a tough pill to swallow.
I think a lot of people won't accept that either, actually. Like, I think it's accurate what you say, but I think a lot of people will just say he's blameless because of what the highs and the success he's had in his career. But I think it's true. Like, he has cost them big. Like, I jokingly called it his barrel arc. And
yeah,
like, that used to be a compliment, but it's very much I'm trying to make this play happen. I'm thinking about what I need to do to carry instead of being like, I'm a support player. I'm the support. I need to support my team. Like, it felt like he often just outright disagreed with some of the decisions his team was making, or felt like his team should be making the same decision as him no matter what. I think even when he was wrong, if they did, it would have been okay, because at least then you can all be on the same page, and even if it's not the most correct decision, you can at least fight through it, and sometimes you can just win anyways. But yeah, Kingen looks like and his performances in their last few losses look like he's ready to go a different team, man. He looked like he was like, I'm out of here. Like just constantly playing in the side lane and not joining some team fights. And I'm not saying he was playing for KDA, but it almost felt like he was. He was the best part of the team at the end of play-ins and wasn't able to get it done. So many fights where he was almost able to carry it for them, but he couldn't quite get it done. So, yeah, I hope Kingen lands on his feet. I hope Calix can continue to grow. I hope Lehen's can get on a stronger roster. or like I don't know, change and evolve as a player again to be back to where we knew from him, or what he was. Listen to your young part of the year you were talking about. It's a little bit sad the way it all went down, but again disappointing because I think they didn't play to what they could have played to, because we knew the highs were there. We knew what they were capable of, and they just didn't show it for half the year.
Little anecdote. Kingan's parents, you're the one that told me this. Kingan parents are his agent and agency. So it's like the Kingan player agency or something like that. So
I mean, at least they used to be. I don't know if that's still accurate now, but I've heard and seen like that they were the ones that were making his negotiations happen.
And they showed up to one of the games, or they showed up to the games, and it was said that Kingan's parents were giving hugs to the Nongshim fans who were crying and bought some people dinner because of the support that they showed the team and their son. And just, this part of the season is always tough for me. There are times where my empathy levels can rise really high. And it's just moments like that where I'm like, man, it's so cool that how strong the community is of League of Legends, that a fandom is here in Korea, and how things like that can go that way. And so I just wanted to give that quick shout out. Before we dive into the bros.
Just for clarity, also, I did check. He is currently with Shadow Corporation now. Just before I just want to make sure, because he was, it seemed represented by his family, but now Shadow Corporation.
Shadow Corp, a great name for an agency. All right. Before we dive into my beloved bros and their 2025 season, it's time to remind you about our friends over at Mando. You hear us talk a lot about Mando. It's the thing that we use a ton here on the show. Wolf and I both have it in our bags, as we don't want to be stinky. And it's best to do that by controlling it before it starts. It's deodorant that's re-engineered to stop odor before it gets going. It doesn't just mask odor, it prevents it, because it's clinical strength sweat control as well. It's not your typical deodorant. 2 times better at controlling sweat than the standard. It controls sweat and odor for up to 72 hours, and just after 12 hours, underarm sweat was reduced by 92%. This stuff is legit. It uses premium products. Unlike other deodorants loaded with chemicals, Mando uses our premium ingredients like gentle mandelic acid to keep you fresh and dry, and it's double protection against odor and sweat. Multiple different form factors. If you like cream, spray, body wash, if you need different scents, they've got you covered with the bourbon leather, Mount Fuji, Pro Sport. It's just a great thing to have here for you to cover a normal thing. Get a little stinkier, Wolf.
But when I'm in a hurry, I always use the spray, and the bourbon leather spray is the one that I go to. And I'll tell you guys a story from yesterday. I actually went to go buy groceries with my wife and my daughter, and it was a pretty hectic day. I was also watching LCK, and it was kind of suddenly we decided, hey, instead of going tomorrow, let's go get groceries today. So I hadn't taken a shower. Okay, I was a bit of a stink wolf, all right? But I went upstairs and sprayed myself with the Mando, all right? And I was like, I'll take a shower when we get home. But I sprayed myself with the bourbon leather, and then I went to the we were on the bus together. It was a crowded bus, and my wife suddenly asked me, like, when did you take a shower? Like, I don't remember you taking a shower. And I was just like, no, I just sprayed Mando. And
that's
she was
crazy.
Like, you smell good. I thought you took a shower. I was like, no, I actually I will take a shower when we get home. But yeah, I wasn't able to take one. And it was just in the afternoon, right? Like, we're headed to the shop to go shopping. But it was crazy to me. And I was like, well, I hope we're talking about Mando tomorrow, because tricked my wife by just spraying the bourbon leather on.
Don't be a stink wolf. Save your marriage and get Mando. It's perfect for new customers. Is Mando's starter pack. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like the mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And as a special listener for our a special offer for our listeners. New customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code Monte Wolf. Use the code Monte Wolf at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's Monte Wolf at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. Please support the show. Tell them we sent you. Mando's got you covered and saves marriages. Thanks for that anecdote, Wolf, and thank you to Mando. That's super funny, man. That's so funny.
It's stay clean, man. Just spray it on. It smells good, and you're not gonna stink. I mean, it's the worst time of year in Korea in terms of humidity. Like we're finally getting past it. It's almost turning into autumn, but when I wear it and I get off my bike on like a hot day where the sun is beating down, sometimes I'm like, ooh, you got to pull your shirt open and take a little sniff. Never stink with a Mando.
All right. Let's get into the bros. They didn't win a series in play-ins. They lost. Man, the Nongshim game was so close. Like we would have lost to BNK for sure, but the Nongshim game. Let's just. We had 3 junglers, man. We had LM, we had Hambach, we had Krako. We didn't sub anyone else in. I don't remember. Bull had to come in because Hype wasn't allowed to play against KT because he's on loan. We let go of Ensign Edgar. I mean, 5 years at one organization is crazy work. That's insane stability in esports, especially on the competitive side. They bring in the new era of Duke. Spent a lot of time over at IG coaching there, and success there. Now running the ship here. You could see a definite change in the way that they drafted. And I the year of closer meme. I don't know, man. I just don't know what to think anymore because it feels like the potential wasn't fulfilled in a year where there was potential. Not just kind of memeing around and figure out who the hell's our mid laner. Like,
yeah,
it could have been. It could have been better.
It's definitely a year that feels disappointing because you know that you didn't reach your potential, especially at the end. But I think Bros should be pretty proud of their year. Like their roster was very budget, and they their 80 carry is a lone player, for example, just to like continue to like put this together, right? So Bro is a team that I think did better than what the sum of their parts were for most of the year, and I think should be proud and should be able to hold their heads high and say like, look, Morgan could only play like 2 champions, and we still made play-ins and almost made playoffs. Like at the beginning of the year, he couldn't play Jace when Jace was the S tier, top tier pick, and we still look what we still did. Like after Duke joined, I think the one big change I noticed was Bro played champions and comps they were less comfortable with. You could tell that in other drafts with Edgar was like, you guys don't want to play this, we're not going to play that, and we're going to play our own thing. Whereas now they played a lot more meta. They put a hype on Jin, for example, which is not very good at, but like he did win that final match to get them here in regular season, and like that's the kind of change you could see is that Bro with Duke were like, let's just try to actually play what's strong right now a little bit more than just like what we are comfortable with. And I think if maybe he had come in earlier, I would have agreed with the choice to drop Edgar. I mean, in hindsight, I would have. Like at the time, if they had just fired him like really, really early in the year, I'd be like, "What the hell?" The same way we reacted the first time. But in hindsight, I think maybe if they had made a change like this bigger or earlier, rather, it would have made a bigger impact for them. Ultimately, though, like for play-ins, I think you had a pretty decent run. You almost beat Nongshim. And had you beaten Nongshim there, like maybe things would look different. Maybe momentum-wise, you would have had a better shot at winning the final match because I don't think they beat BNK. Not just because of the meme and BNK's record, but because BNK are just really good and they were the best play-ins team. But like ultimately, if Bro made it to playoffs, they probably get 3-0 to either way. Like which is maybe the reality for both of our playoffs qualifying teams. That's kind of what I'm feeling. But I think for Bro, like the excitement of making plans and having that extra chance was really awesome. And I thought maybe people would be super down when they lost. Like I thought I thought I was going to see the players walking by looking like completely crushed, and they really weren't. I think everyone was pretty proud of what Bro was able to do this year, and I think they should be. And I don't know what the roster is going to look like next year. We have no idea, but I'm hoping for big things. I'm hoping that this team can either get some more budget with a proof of concept that they have with the drastic changes they made this year, or just try to build around Closer as your core player, Morgan as your top laner, and see what you can find.
Yeah, I appreciated Hype's growth and moments. I highly doubt that he's gonna take Duckdom's spot as well. I think Duckdom has locked it down and made it his own for KT. But I think that moving on from Hype is the play. Hype and Palu, you got to get a new bot lane. I think we've now seen 3 years of Palu, and like what we said last time about Bulldog, where are you going to get a mid laner who is better? I feel like that's at premium. So you keep him. I think with support, you don't have that luxury. You don't have I think support, you need to see how they play in the game and how they function, how they affect the game, how they see the game. And I think it's time to try a new one. Whether it's, I don't think it's get a veteran, right? Because get a veteran is what they tried to do with effort. I don't know if it's get another young guy. I think it's try to get like the 2 to 3 year guy, like someone who's kind of been there a little bit and maybe not fully had a shot, maybe like a Quantum, maybe a Pleta, perhaps. I don't know. Like, I just think it can't be too young or too old. It has to be someone that's somewhere in the middle that you give them 2 years. But I think just Palu's up and downness was stressing me out so much. It was just so frustrating, man. Okay. Rep the bros. Thank you for 2025. It was a lot of fun. And as we say, whenever they lose, there's always next time. All right, Wolf, let's get into the future. That was a lot of the past. Let's get into the future. As this episode has gone stupid long, and now we have our playoffs. We have T1 selecting Dplus Kia, so they didn't do anything weird and pick the higher qualifier, even though Dplus is the higher seed from the qualifier. So it'll be 3 versus 6, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, T1 Dplus, and more excitingly, a reinvigorated B&K Fearx with a not sure what to expect KT. Let's start with T1 Dplus because I feel like that one's going to be faster.
3-0. There is no chance against the best team at setting up on objectives. Like I legit think T1's objective team fighting and their setup for objectives, their Baron sneaks, dragon control, better than Genji. Like I think this team is actually so good at that. That's like what they're best at. So even when they're down on gold, they can win those miracle games. Even when they're not the favorite in a series, they can steal games away. It's like the worst possible matchup for Dplus because that's what they're worst at, is setting up on late game dragon fights, elders, barons, Otacons. Like this is what Dplus is the worst at. Like I think T1 will just clean them so easily. I think even if I see Dplus, like they have some draft where they have lane prio and they end up with like a 2,500 gold lead at 15 minutes. I'm sitting there. I'm going to be sitting on my monitor or sitting at the stage or potentially casting. I don't know if I'm casting this match or not. I haven't even checked yet which one of those matches I'm casting. I think I'm not casting it. But like I'm going to be watching the game saying like, oh, it's still early. Don't worry. T1 100% beats them in team fights later. And there's no doubt in my mind. This is just unfortunately a Dplus roster that we've talked about all of its problems, so I don't want to get into it more, but like I said, this is the horrible mismatch for them that T1 wants, which is why they choose them. Obviously, B&K was the stronger performing team in play-ins, but I think B&K's style is more dangerous to T1 than Dplus's style.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think if there's a way on in, I don't see it. Like, even if she was firing off and Lucid, I mean, he's going up against one of the best junglers. Like, maybe it's mid lane, maybe it's Showmaker, but then, it's going to need to be like lane dominant Showmaker, not, playmaker Showmaker, not TF Showmaker, because I think Faker will be able to match that. That has been Faker's strength this year. So where is the matchup that feels better? Not sure. Give me 3-0, and T1 is a team that you can trust for a clean sweep, I guess. So is Dplus. They did it yesterday against Nongshim, and not many people were brave enough to vote for the 3-0, but all right, give me 3-1. Give me 3-1. I changed my mind. I'll take a dusting the rust off from a week off, and Dplus pull out a vintage Showmaker performance. Let's move to the other series. KT and B&K FearX, brother. Like, that one is interesting to me because Clear got POM of the last series. Raptor is, I think, had better performances than Cuz did, again, in two different groups. And Vikla is not just going to get absolutely pounded by BDD. And then coin flip, Diablo can go heads over Duck Dom and Peter. Could happen. You can see where that world happens.
So, to me, I think the weakest part of KT still is perfect, right? And then I look at his opposition, I'm like, oh no, because he's facing Clear. Oh, okay, I don't think that's even if Clear is better than him on the day, which we can't even necessarily predict because Perfect is spiking hard at the end of the year here. That's not gonna be like, it's a huge mismatch. Like, Perfect isn't laning against Keen in this one, So I think that's where, to me, I look at it and go, well, we know BDD wins, we know Cuz wins, and Duck Dom might end up being like one of the 80 carries at the end of the year where we're like, wow, maybe we really just misjudged this guy early on in the year, because he is so good right now. I think he's significantly better than Diablo. I think Peter is really, really good right now as well. Kellen had insane performances, obviously, in play-ins. His triple stun on Leona was just god tier. But I think KT, there's another factor here that we haven't seen them in a long time, and you watch B&K play, you watch Raptor's early jungling, how good he is at that, and snowballing the bottom lane. But KT are just a better macro team. Like, they showed it time and time again in the Legend group that their macro is insane. BDD's ability to play roaming mids, in particular the Talia and the Ryze, is just insane. And if he gets his hands on those picks, I think you're just not going to be able to follow KT around the map. And BDD's always going to have prio. BD's Annie, also insane, by the way. Like, he just has all of the full package. And so I can't really imagine in my mind B&K winning a game, even though it's been a while since we've seen KT, right? And B&K looked really good. If you kind of just forget that there's a huge gap between Legend and Rise groups, if you just kind of like remove that from your brain and you look at B&K's recent performances with the eye test, you're like, they could maybe beat anyone. Like, they're so good right now. But in truth, I think it's going to be somewhat of a reality check. Now, I said the same thing when we had Nongshim against Bro. And it was kind of true at first, and then it became a little bit less true, and then it was true in the end. But how the beginning of Nongshim Bro went is kind of how I expect all three games to go in this series, that I will predict 3-0 for KT.
I mean, I definitely thought that being the bottom of the group, right? I am a head of the dog lover and a tail of the lion hater. But I think there was a pretty big self-imploding issue with Nongshim compared to,
I mean, KT is the butt. They're not even the tail, okay? They're like they're like the back end.
They're the back end, they're the butt of it. And they were able to get the victories there on against T1 and Gen G, able to pick off some games there. So I think there's a chance, but that KT end up being our fourth best team. but they need to stop probably the hottest team in play-ins in B&K Fear X. Give me another 3-1 Andy for KT.
3-1 Andy. I think KT could be the third best team in the LCK if they can continue their arc. We'll see what it looks like for Hanwha. I'm not saying that I think they are the third best team. I think they could be. I think B&K fans are hoping the same thing. Like, maybe B&K could actually be a top 4 team in the LCK, and the KT fans like, maybe we could be a top 3 team. Probably like one KT fan's like, I think we could be a top 2 team. Well, maybe not. Probably not. But yeah, I think this first round is just not going to be that interesting. Like, I also would expect that, based on our predictions, we'll have Dplus against B&K in the lower bracket, and I would expect that B&K win again. And I think most people will predict that because I think T1 will crush Dplus harder than KT will crush B&K. And so then Dplus will look worse, even though like they're not necessarily like as much worse as people think, but B&K won last time, and I think we'll play closer against KT, and they'll probably win that one. And then we'll see what else happens after that.
Yeah. All right. I'm excited to finally see some world-class League of Legends. We were seeing some entertaining League of Legends. We're seeing some culture. We do have a little bit of culture left, 2 teams of culture left, and I'm excited for that first game to see if T1 gets dragged into the culture. But it's also great to have some cream of the crop here, and we'll get to see some of that later on this week. Wolf, what a long episode. I told you, man, if we did All-Pro first, you were going to yap forever. But
well,
a great episode.
I don't know. It's what people want to hear, you know?
Yeah.
We did it for the people.
All right. Well, playoffs are off and underway. Double elimination all the way through. Not a single elimination into the double elimination bracket part like over in LCK Cup. This is just straight up double elimination with Gen G and Hanwha Life Esports seeded into that second round. We will have it all covered here on Monte Wolf. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks to our partners for the show. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.